Should now be recording. Okay, today is March 1st, 2018. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of ITSE 2309 at Collin College. Database programming. Let's see, we are tonight, two things we're doing tonight. One is reviewing and recovering some of the aggregate functions, and then another review. Then we will have test one tonight. For those of you following us from home, I will give instructions for test one. I don't know, should I give the instructions for test one first or when I finish with what we're doing tonight? We're not going to go very long tonight. Let me go ahead and give the instructions for test one. How about that? And then that way, if somebody just wants to get that, they'll get it right away. Okay. Test one, let me go to it. Somebody has sent me a message. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, P70, that's where we are. I will go to test one. Test one review, the practice test one. Practice test one should now be finished. Practice test one should be finished. We're starting test one. Okay. Whatever.
You posted the solutions.
I know, I posted the solutions. Well, it's only 5 points. I mean, the whole idea of practice test is to practice. It's not about can you get the solutions. If you do it, I'm going to give you the 5 points. Okay. Well, practice on it, and the whole idea is if you all you do is copy the solutions, how's it doing you any good? I mean, okay. Anyway, let me go to the test one. At the bottom, it should be enabled. You should be able to see it. And it says, do not access the test until you are ready to complete it. And I last semester, I made the mistake of when you hit test one, you accessed it, and it said, do not access this until you're ready. But as soon as you hit it, even read the instructions, you accessed it. That doesn't happen here. So it's okay to follow the link. Document will be time-stamped. You have 2 hours. It will carry a point penalty. The point penalty is not exactly severe. If it's a few minutes, go ahead and take your extra time. If it's 15, 20 minutes, you do better off taking the extra time and finishing the test than stopping and leaving it half done. Okay. If it turns into 8 or 10 hours, then it gets significant. But all right, you have 2 hours. So this one locks at 9:59 on Monday morning. So you should have finished it by then. When you follow the link, you will begin test one. I'm going to go ahead and follow the link. And this is just open a file with Microsoft Word. It is a Microsoft Word document. And let me just make sure that we can access it. What is your username? Would you go ahead and try to access it at this time and tell me that you can access it and then just close it? I want to see somebody else access it to make sure that I have it enabled. I don't want to hear about it later. Everyone else don't access it, and so I'll see that you did, and then closed it, and that's fine.
It says the folder test one, which is file has been locked.
Good. That's what I mean. Not good, but that's what I wanted to. Okay, I gotta fix something. That would have been embarrassing. Let me see. I go to files, module files, test one. Now try it again, please. It looks like it's going? Well, if it hasn't given you an error this far, it probably won't. Okay, anyway, I see what the problem with it was. So I need to fix that on all of them.
Did that event start my timer
Just close it. I wouldn't ask you to do something and then.
Oh man, I didn't do it like
I just needed to troubleshoot it. And in just a minute, we will have these fixed. Those of you who are following along know that I'm going to test one and that I have an unpublished module here. When I publish it, I'm going to go to available with links. Okay. So that should fix that problem because you have a link. All right. Okay, questions on that? I'm going to give you time in class to do it. Should you choose to, remember all of my classes are the same, whether you are online or not. An online student may come into class and do it in class. A student that's in class may choose to complete the test at home on their own computer. I'm not responsible for your computer or your link crashing. So you have the opportunity to do it here. Questions on that? Do I have anybody else? I don't have anybody else even here tonight. What's going on? Where's everybody? Let's see. Linda? Is that? Well, I'm sorry. Your name is Kathy. Kathy, right? Did you have a question?
I just tried text practice text one, but it seems the author still haven't.
You're having a problem with practice test one on the SQL server?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll check that when I finish the lecture tonight, okay? All right, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and begin tonight. I'm going to go to modules, and I'm going to be tonight in module 7. Module 7 and the material that I cover tonight will not be covered on test 1. I highly recommend Dr. King's video. I'm not going to take class time to play the video for you. You can play the video at home. I highly recommend it. It is good. I know this particular instructor well, and he is good, and he gives good lectures. So it's well worth listening to what he has to say about the matter. You get it from 2 different sources, and this is a good thing. Okay, there are 5 aggregate functions covered in our textbook and most of them. What is an aggregate function? An aggregate function is a function that goes through the database and aggregates. What does that mean? It means collects everything into one number. So a count would be how many records do you have, where that field is not null. Average would be, if it's a number, it would be the average. If it's not a number, it's going to be an error. Minimum, maximum, that will work on character fields also. It'll just be the highest one that would be in the alphabet. Let's see, minimum, maximum, and what else do I have? Sum, add them all up. So average and sum. Average, sum only work on numbers. Minimum, maximum, count work on anything that can be compared. So it could be character data. Okay. Let's see. You have an issue in most aggregate functions if all of your fields in the table are null. It doesn't make sense to take the average of some numbers that you don't have, because you're trying to divide by 0. How many fields do you have? 0. Divided by what? The sum of them. I can't even do the sum if I don't have any. Okay. So if I don't have any at all, the average will be undefined. If I don't have any records that aren't null, the count I believe will be 0, because it makes sense to say how many records do I have if I don't have any records? Well, that's 0. What is the average of my employee's salary if I don't have any employees? That doesn't make any sense. What is the sum of that salary? It doesn't make any sense. What is the minimum? What is the maximum? That doesn't make any sense. So I think count will work if you don't have any, but the rest of them don't. So the problem is that you really should check to see that you have some before you run one of these. Now, I'm not going to enforce that, but if we got to the next class and we were programming, and we were writing a program, and our program had to run on any data set, it would have to run on an empty data set also. So I would say you have to check and make sure you have at least one record before you talk about the average. One record that has one of these numbers that you're averaging. Okay. So select count. Notice that anytime that I use an aggregate function, I must rename the table using rename that column using an as. Okay, it's absolutely important that you do that. If not, you end up with a column that has no name, and this is not good. So anytime we use an aggregate, count, invoice ID, as, we will have to give it a name. I'm not fussy about what name you give it. It's perfectly okay with me if you name it X. Well, okay, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should name it something that makes sense, something that would make sense to a reasonable person. If we executed, we'd find that we had 114 values. If we had said count all, if we use the term count all, that will count duplicates also. So if we had duplicate invoice IDs, and we certainly can have duplicates. Let's see, invoice ID is the primary key, so we could not have duplicates. there are two words, count all. In other words, we're going to count duplicates as two different records, or count distinct, which if you have duplicates, they will only count as one. The default is count distinct always, and you don't have to say count distinct. We saw that happen in the union. We saw union all. There's also another one that says union distinct. We typically don't say distinct because that is typically the default for database, is that if there are duplicate values, they only count as one value. So that is typically the default. Disregard duplicate values. If you count and it does not does not count null values. If there's nothing there, it doesn't count it. Questions so far? Okay, talk here about counting heads. If you were told to take a head count, would you really count heads? Is it important to count the person's head? What if I couldn't see the person's head? What if they were behind a screen and I could only see their feet? Should I count them anyway? Or do I have to walk around and make sure I can see their head? A head count, okay? Usually when you say a head count, you mean count the people, okay? So in database, if it is simply to count it, I could say count invoice ID. That is guaranteed to be the count of the records. However, this is kind of like saying, give me a head count. If a person is in the room and they're alive, they have to have a head. So there is no point in me making the system go look for their head. I'm just going to say count asterisk, count any part of them that you can see. If you see a person there, count it. You don't have to go find anything special about it. Now that's the count asterisk is if all you're interested in is the count of the records. And instead of counting the primary key, you should say count asterisk. Are you with me? If you say count invoice ID or whatever the primary key is, then the system has to go look inside of each record for the primary key and make sure it's not null, but it can't be null. And I don't really care because I want to count all of the records. I'm not interested in the primary key. I just want a count of the records. In that case, you use count asterisk. This is one place where you can speed up your SQL over something that most of the time, it doesn't really matter how you write the SQL. Write it any way that works and let the system take care of it. This particular one, the system won't do. This one you need to do to help out the system. Questions? If we say count asterisk and the range is null, we get 0. AVG and sum only work on numbers. Doesn't make any sense to add up character data. Average doesn't make any sense to try to average character data. If they're not numbers, they don't work. Both of them require that you have a number or that is an error. I believe they return null if you don't have any data for them to average or sum. However, it is considered an error to try to take an average of something that you don't have. I believe SQL Server just returns null, but you should check that. Minimum and maximum work on any data type that it makes sense to compare, and everything that we have today that we've seen so far, it makes sense to compare it. We're going to see some that it does not make sense to compare. It doesn't make sense to compare a picture to another picture. and I say which one is greater, which one is smaller, which one is prettier. Database can't do that. And we're going to see that we can have pictures in our database. They're not very interesting to database people because there isn't much I can do with them except put them in there and take them out. Numbers, dates, character strings, all of them have minimum, maximum. Now, if there are nulls, if you are doing minimum and maximum, and you have any null values, so this is one reason I don't like nulls. If you're trying to find a minimum or a maximum name, and I don't have a name or a birth date, and I don't have a birth date, am I the first one, the last one, or do I just appear someplace in the middle? So what is the maximum date in a field if there are nulls in that field someplace? Are the nulls the maximum? Are they the minimum? Answer is we don't know, because it makes no sense at all to talk about greater than, less than, equal to. It just so happens that when it shows them to you, it shows nulls. If you say order by this field, and you happen to have nulls in that field, so you say order by first name, and somebody doesn't have a first name, they're going to appear, I believe, at the beginning of it. If you say ascending, they will appear at the, descending, they'll appear at the end. But that's just where they have to show them to you someplace. If you ask for a minimum or a maximum, it's going to show you the minimum or the maximum. It will return it, but it's going to give you a warning that you are trying to compare a null value. You have null values in there. So it doesn't, your minimum and maximum might not be valid. What do you consider the minimum if you have a null value? I don't know. So there's no set way that says what is the minimum if you don't have one. Get off my cord here.